This episode of Truth Table is brought to you by PenguinRandomHouse.com. Sisters, how y'all feel? Brothers, y'all all right? If this is your first time at Truth Table, welcome to the table. And if you've been sitting at the table with us all these years, we are so grateful that you have been listening to us through these years, and we are inviting you to partner with us and support our work at patreon.com/truthstable. Now pull up a chair and have a seat at the table with us. Hey y'all, welcome to Truth Table, Midwives of Culture for Grace and Truth. I'm Ekemini.
And I'm Christina.
This table is built by Black women and for Black women. So welcome to the table, C. How you doing, girl?
I am doing well. You know, the sun is shining. We got good weather. We are recording in person, and people who listen to the show know that when we record in person, it is a special treat, and anything could happen.
Anything. Wardrobe changes, wardrobe malfunctions, hair changes.
Listen.
Microphones.
Listen.
Yeah, anything.
All
Anything's on the table, y'all.
And today is a very special day in terms of anything can happen.
Yes.
Because we have a lovely guest with us today. The Dr. Monique Gadson is here with us today.
Yes.
And I am excited because, you know, I'm very pro-psychologist. And so we have not just one psychologist at the table, but two. Because that's how much intervention we need people today.
And I'm about to get therapized. Okay, not really, but yeah, still.
Not really.
I do be tapping on them like, wait a minute. I will get therapized at dinner, though. I will. I already know. I'm already prepared, so that's fine.
Don't worry. Everybody can catch a little something.
There you go. But just in case y'all don't know who our dear sister, Dr. Monique Smith Gadson is, I'm going to tell you a little something about her. Okay. Dr. Monique Smith Gadson is a licensed professional counselor, consultant, speaker, and owner of C.H.U.R.C.H Counseling and Consulting Services. Her areas of professional and ministerial interests include premarital and pre-engagement education counseling. We need that.
Well,
individual development, family of origin relationships, marriage and family therapy, and education, the intersection of theology and psychology, and the church and mental health ministry. She serves as a consultant to churches, assisting with program and ministry development that creates synergy and builds healthy and effective relationships. Monique writes on integrating emotional, mental, and developmental issues with spirituality, specifically Christianity. She is an advocate for mental health issues, especially in the African American church and community. She served for 16 years as the clinical mental health counselor for a suburban church in East Atlanta. Currently, she is an assistant professor of counseling psychology with the Seattle School of Psychology and Theology. Welcome to the table, Dr. Gadson. It's good to have you here, sis.
Yes.
It's been a long time coming. You made it.
Help us. Help us, God. Dr. Mo. Help us.
With family. I'm so happy to be here. Thank y'all.
Yes.
It's a real treat to have you here.
Oh my goodness.
And obviously we talk to you fairly frequently.
Yes. We do.
Yes.
We do.
There are some people that, you know, literally it is our first time meeting them when we interview them on the show.
Yes.
And it's a meet and greet and it's very nice. You know, that typically 89% of the time, 99% of the time, it's a lovely first time meeting.
Right.
But every once in a while, we get to talk to somebody that we talk to all the time. Like we are in the chats. You know, we're in the text messages.
In
you know,
the intercessory prayer.
Listen, we are a part of a team. Okay,
That's right.
We are
almost like a singing group known as the Prayer Warrior Chat.
prayer warriors.
Chat text messages that we have, and we have lots of things to pray about. By the way,
Right. Amen.
A lot of things.
listen, the block is hot inside the text messages that we have that we are praying about. But I'm so grateful to welcome you in this very formal way.
Thank you.
For our audience. And for those of you who are a part of the Black Women's Facebook Discipleship Group, you've had the pleasure of being taught by Dr. Gadson inside that group. But today we get to just learn from her. And before we go there, I would just love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners in your own way. We got your formal introduction. And obviously we feel like we know you a little bit, a swig here and there. But how would you want to introduce yourself? Tell them who you are and what makes you who you are.
Oh my goodness. Who am I and what makes me who I am? Woo, do we have enough time?
Come on now. Come on.
No,
It's very therapist question. There.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I'll just kind of start out with saying because I think it really forms, like, as you say, who I am and the work that I do. So when I arrived here on earth, I was already the daughter of a pastor. It's like I was born one month, and the very next month he was being installed. My dad was being installed at his first pastorate.
Yeah.
So that's what I've known. My formative years growing up in the church, being part of a ministerial family. So kind of knowing church, the ins, the outs, the late nights, the all day Sundays, and all of the things. That's been really formative in who I am as in the work that I do now. Grew up between two brothers, so middle child syndrome, as my folks used to say. Yeah, I got that going on. But I say that simply because I know part of our conversation too is just have always had just affinity for the Black man. Just kind of knowing that the societal treatment of Black men. So I think just kind of growing up with brothers and kind of being around Black guys a lot, just, their friends and my friends and everything. That has also informed a lot of the work that I do in terms of being, kind of with the book, just kind of wanting to be alongside guy friend, helping him through his struggle. So just kind of throw that in because I know conversation will be about that later on. But married, been married for a long minute. We stopped counting. We said have 2 girls, 2 young adult girls. Yeah.
So long y'all stopped counting.
We hit 20. It was like, all right, then we're somewhere between 20 and 30. We're closer to 30 now. But
that is
so married, college sweetheart. So and
that's how I feel about my age. I stopped counting too.
But because you're the college sweetheart too. That's true.
Oh yes, I'm
right.
also a college sweetheart as well.
College sweethearts, yes, and 2 young adult daughters. So
Beautiful.
and that's a journey in and of itself as well. But that's who I am. So
wow. Well, thank you for introducing us. And, I learned a little bit more about you even just from your own self introduction. So thank you for that. Y'all, the topic on the table really is it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but we really will be kind of centering in on the epidemic of loneliness and how that works out in different relationships and how it shows up, in our lives. And because earlier this year, I can already say that now because we're so far into the year now.
Is it not moving?
It's on like this year is moving. Yes. But earlier this year, the Surgeon General, I'm going to actually read a little something from him. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services released a press release actually in May 2023. And Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy calls for action to address the public health crisis of loneliness in our nation. And so he says here, I'm just going to it says, today, United States Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy released a new Surgeon General advisory warning, calling attention to the public health crisis of loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection in our country. Even before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, approximately half of U.S. adults reported experiencing measurable levels of loneliness. Disconnection fundamentally affects our mental, physical, and societal health. In fact, loneliness and isolation increase the risk for individuals to develop mental health challenges in their lives, and lacking connection can increase the risk for premature death to levels comparable to smoking daily.
Wow.
Okay. And so, so I just wanted to lift that up to kind of help frame our discussion. And, I just would love to hear from you in your line of work and working with, it seems like different people in different life stages, in their lives. I want to see from your own experience, your own clinical experience, what have you seen? Does this ring true in your own practice and in your own work? And how do you help people navigate and facilitate deep connection to combat that?
Yeah, so I would say yes, definitely have seen it. I'm going to kind of pull from the years that I served at the church, especially because I kind of would think of myself as a general practitioner when I was there, because I would see, people would bring their children or their teenagers or, the elderly or the married couple. So I saw like the whole gamut, the population. And I can safely say that over those years, there was a theme of loneliness in every generation, in every population. So it could look like in the children being bullied. And so therefore, there's a little social isolation. They're not wanting to develop relationships because they are afraid, like, okay, are you going to hurt me like I've been hurt? Teenagers, same thing. We're moving into this age of social media. And so they are very engrossed in, connecting via the phone and technology. And really what I have observed and have stated aloud is that they lack relational skills. They really don't know how to be with each other. And I mean, I know that professionally and personally, my girls could have friends over and they're all like on their phones. And I'm thinking, let's put those away and let's be together, while we're in this space. So seeing it there, for sure, loneliness happens within marriages.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that one first before I even talk about singles, singles and loneliness, because we tend to think of that kind of automatically. But there are some married people who are very lonely, within their marriages. And in the elderly, if they've lost spouses, and friends. And I can even remember my dear aunt telling me when she was nearing her 80s, and she said, I've lost a lot of friends that are my age, a lot of people in the community and in church. And so there is this epidemic. I would truly be able to speak to across the population, across, the developmental timeline, if you will, that there is this epidemic of loneliness for sure. Wow.
I mean, when I think about what it means to be in a community, but still alone.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that lets us know that loneliness is more than just being the absence of having people around.
That's right.
Right? So can you give us some examples of maybe the ways in which loneliness misshapes people, the way that it burdens them, and how would we be able to recognize that in ourselves? And the reason why I say that is because I think there's shame attached to people clearly stating that they are lonely.
Yes.
Particularly people in Christian spaces, believers. I think, as we know, there's a whole lot of mental health stigma in general, but to confess out loud, I feel lonely.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if maybe it'd be helpful to work backwards. Then, in other words, people are less likely to consciously say I'm lonely. But maybe there's some other ways that they would know that they could lead them to saying that out loud. So what might be some of the signs of loneliness?
Yeah, so it very well could be when you are in a group of people and you feel like you don't belong, like you don't connect. It's like I'm sitting with these people, and so let's use the church setting as we're kind of talking about. You're thinking, okay, we use that language, just join a ministry, when you first come in. And so, okay, people join the ministry, and they very well can be among people and feel this sense of disconnect, or even feel as though they don't know. And this kind of goes back to what I really believe when we lack the relational skills, just really feeling as though I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to even begin the conversation, So if people kind of find themselves in that place, I think that that's one way that we can, look within and say, hey, could this be that I'm really lonely, even though I am among this group of individuals? And I also believe, too, that there is a lot of social anxiety, for sure. But I think it shows up in different ways, kind of as you're speaking. But I also believe that there is this, because I'm seeing this not just in the church, but also in the classroom, where it's this sense of, if I mess up, I'm going to get canceled. If I say the wrong thing.
So much burden to be perfect.
Yes. Yeah, there's almost like this walking on, eggshells. Yeah, when I'm trying to say something and I don't know, what this person's, political belief system may be, or, how they feel about this or that. And so seeing students, kind of posted in each corner. I kind of thought of it as like everybody's holding a base, and I'm saying, well, you don't want to come to the middle and play, kind of get into the game, basically
there you go.
Is what I was asking students. And so there is this sense of, they just felt that they, as long as they were talking kind of like small talk, everything was fine, but trying to forge the relationship to prepare to, engage in this this term together. There's a real fear of connecting, and I think it is due to that fear of being canceled.
Yep, and therefore rejected. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Rejection.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
thrown away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Treated as disposable. All types of terrible, feelings and impact that would have on any person. So I'm gonna intro it, and then after commercial break, I want you to break this down. But yeah, it just sounds like there is just no grace for people to grow. No grace for people to grow, in this culture that we're in, at least at the moment, to get things wrong. The only way we grow and we learn is for us to get things wrong. But I wonder, in your own practice, how do you begin to coach people and teach people to gain emotional resilience so that they might grow in courage and bravery to step out, and to begin to build emotional connection. So think on that. Yes. And we'll take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after these messages. So keep it locked. Remember Us by National Book Award winner Jacqueline Woodson brings readers a powerful story that delves deeply into life's burning questions about time and memory and what we take with us into the future. It seems like Sage's whole world is on fire the summer before she starts 7th grade. As house after house burns down, her Bushwick neighborhood gets referred to as the Matchbox in the local papers. And while Sage prefers to spend her time shooting hoops with the guys, she's also trying to figure out her place inside the circle of girls she's known since childhood, a group that each day feels further and further away from her. But it's also the summer of Freddie, a new kid who truly gets Sage. Together, they reckon with the pain of missing things that get left behind as time moves on, savor what's good in the present, and buoy each other up in the face of destruction. And when the future comes, it is Sage's memories of the past that show her the way forward. Remember Us speaks to the power of both letting go and holding on. Buy Remember Us wherever books are sold. All right, we are back at the table with our dear sister, Dr. Monique Smith Gadson. So right before the commercial break, I was speaking to you about how there's just doesn't seem like there's any grace for people to grow, right? And so within this cultural context, let's just say it that way. You can't seem to be able to make a mistake. You got to be perfect. That's the sense that people are, or the pressure that people are feeling. Yeah. And I wonder, in your own work and in your practice and working with people from across different demographics and class status and goodness, all that runs the gamut, right? In your own general practice. I'm curious about how you help people grow emotional resilience so that they can tap into the courage and bravery that one needs in order to step out from holding up the walls, those four corners you talked about, and to go in and enter into relationship and connectivity with other people. How do you do that?
Yeah,
I think people do that.
Right. I think the first thing, they have to acknowledge, like, what are the fears?
That's right.
Like, what are you afraid of? What are you thinking is going to happen? Because there is some meaning that we are associating with, oh, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say the wrong thing, so we have an outcome probably in our minds. We have a meaning that's already ascribed to that. So first and foremost, I'm asking, what is it that you are afraid of? What is the worst in your mind that you're thinking could happen? So once they are able to kind of start talking through the fears, and sometimes, and you very well know, Christina, as you say, we talk clinician to clinician, sometimes a lot of that is trauma informed, from what people have experienced in their own lives. And so they're thinking, okay, well, I don't want to mess this up. So the case in point, this just popped into my head. So a student, I had them role playing, okay? And I had a student who, two students and husband, wife kind of a thing. And, we were doing some role playing, and the guy goes, oh my God, I screwed up my first marriage and I don't even know what to say here. So he's taking, his real life scenario and is projected into just this role playing that we're doing in the classroom setting. Mm-hmm. So I know sometimes it is also trauma informed. So we talk about that, and we're talking about, okay, what have you experienced? What are part of your lived experiences that may be informing, again, these fears that you have that keep you from wanting to engage in this relationship or try to do this work of connecting with one another. So I think that once you are able to acknowledge those fears and kind of work through those, and then I talk to people a lot about the corrective emotional experience. And so I'm hoping that even just using that language, I hope that that is a way where people can feel they can just kind of, exhale. It's like, it's corrective. That means things have not gone well or right or, whatever the case may be somewhere along the way. And as we're trying to correct it, and we know that, it's like, it's a give or take, it's a back and forth. It's kind of trial and error. And so I try to really normalize that, although we live in a culture that does not. So trying to help them to understand, like, okay, just because this is what's happening out there does not necessarily mean it's the healthy thing that's happening. And so I'm hoping that when people do understand that, and they can, and just even learning things like, I'm sorry, I did not know that this might offend you or upset you. That was not my intention. Just being able to kind of fill in those gaps, where it's kind of like, oh gosh, we just kind of go from 0 to 100. And I'm thinking, I say so often, what does it look like in between? What does that in between work look like? And so helping people to just try to imagine more about what would I say or could say or would like to even say. So many times I've even talked to people and say, what do you want to say to them? And they would say, I want to say this, but I don't know if it's, offensive or will it hurt or whatever the case may be. And so in the classroom, I'll say, well, say it to the person and let's just see how it goes. So I try to get them to build up that courage, like you're saying, just through normalizing the fact that it takes trial and error. It's murky. It's just not going to be perfect. It's just not. So
that's good.
The reminder of the importance of that corrective emotional experience, right? So some people, depending on your school of thought, right? Some people would look at that kind of like, Freudian repetition compulsion, that we continue to go through these loops of the same scenario over and over again. Like, what? How did I get here again? How did I get here again? Right? And I tend to, I look at that as at times as a measure of grace. Yes. That we are here again, although it doesn't feel like grace. It feels awful. Right. It feels like it feels like this is a terrible deja vu, right? Yeah. But it is a measure of grace in that God is giving us an opportunity to do something different when there's a script that has told us this is how it's always going to be. That's right. And I think about in my life and in the lives of people I know, but even throughout scripture, these moments that feel like deja vu, but there's a remix that happens this time. That's right. So there's a remix that happens with Joseph and his brothers. Yes. Right? So Joseph has experienced being mistreated by those who said they would have his back, his brothers, then certainly by those who he had explained prophecy to, explained dreams. They didn't have his back right away. It took a long time. He sat in the jail for a long time. And then even as he was hiding his identity, finally, eventually, he has this moment again, this full circle, where something different happens in that moment. Yeah. That's right. And I think for all of us who are feeling like we keep repeating these unhealthy cycles, there could be a grace in there. That's right. For something different to come out the next time around. Absolutely. And so talk a little bit about how you minister to people through and within the work of psychology, which we know is a controversial field, right? That's right. Yes. Even when I mentioned kind of this Freudian concept, some people are like, watch out,
Save your emails.
Yes, well, clearly, because Lord knows I'm not reading them, but I just don't have time, saints. But tell us about how, this PK. Tell us how you minister through this field of psychology.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. I think, looking back on probably how it had begun for me, I remember So this was back in the day before, small town Alabama. So before the church was, 5 days a week operational. The pastor's house was,
the spot.
There you go. So, there was no calling the secretary and saying, I would like to meet with the pastor. It's just kind of like call the house.
Wow.
Pastor Smith, I need to come by and talk to you, and as children, we were kind of sent, get to your rooms, get your snacks and your water and whatever you need. Don't come out. Okay, yes. So, but I can just remember hearing people clearly upset. Like I could just hear people wailing. And I would think to myself, like, oh my God, what are they saying? Like, what are they saying? Or what is he saying to them? That is causing these intense emotional responses. And I remember asking my dad once, and I said, well, Dad, what do you do? Like, what do you do? And he said, I pray with people. And I said, well, what about when they walk away? And he said, I just continue to pray. And so it was a day where they did not know, or if they did know, as you know, the mistrust, the suspicion, in the world of psychology, there was no go talk to a therapist, right? Talk to a therapist. And so I think then in my early years, I always just kind of wonder, like, what happens when the people leave the altar? What happens when the people, leave the house? We would know some situations that were going on in the lives of people. And I just kind of always wonder, like, what happens? It just always felt like there was this big gap, like what happens there, right? Yeah. And so, and that's, I guess that question was something that just stayed with me. And I can just remember clearly when the Lord just said, I want you to go and train as a therapist. And I was thinking, okay, no problem. And then I literally heard, but the Spirit was saying, prepare to work in the church, the Black church specifically. And I'm thinking, Lord, Black folk don't do this. Like, we don't do therapy. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? But nevertheless, I went and, got trained clinically. Also did an integrative training in the psychology and the theology. And being immersed in church, I believe, all my life, I just would take what we would learn, the theories, and I'm thinking, this sounds like this, how we may say it in the church. And so I just tried to translate it into the language of church, So, so for an example, instead of saying, let's start a support group, I would just say, let's, do a ministry for those who have that have dealt with overcoming substance or something. Let's have a spiritual ministry, to just kind of minister to them. So I just would speak the language of church, if you will, trying to take psychology and translate it into the language that we are accustomed to, to make it not feel so suspect, and thinking like, oh, okay, are we guinea pigs, or, what are you doing on us or with us or with our brains or with our minds,
Especially when people have been that.
And when that has happened, and I've had several people that would come to me and say that, So I think that that is how it started for me to take psychology, to kind of do this work now, where I feel like I've seen things evolve. It's where once upon a time, it's like psychology was taboo. Now it's like all therapy and no church, so where we're kind of getting to, my therapist is my pastor or my preacher, and I'm kind of thinking, no, we don't know. We're not going to go that far, like there is a both and with that. Yeah. So, but it is interesting to see how over the years, like over the decades, that there has been this evolution where people were like, not at all. And now it's like, no, this is kind of my sermon, if you will. So, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. One thing about them tables, they be turning.
They turn.
They turn.
They do turn.
They do. They turn. Well, Monique, you wrote a book, or you co-authored.
Yes.
Hope, in a dark place. And I'm just curious about what prompted you to write that book, and how can believers have a proper understanding of depression and its manifold manifestations? Because, we've come a long way in the Black church with regard to mental health health awareness and understanding and depression and bipolar, all of the, various ways that mental health, issues manifest. But it's still quite a bit of talk about, the spirit of depression. So some of that.
Yes.
So how can you help people, have a really good, some good handles, let me say, on mental health, on mental health issues, and even just kind of what led you to co-author that book.
Yeah. So co-authoring with Dr. Clarence Schuler, he reached out to me and asked me would I write with him, and I was like, why and what are we talking about here? But he did say that his agent wanted him to use my voice in this book where he's telling his story about depression.
Okay.
Black male, Black minister, all of the areas where you would think these people or that person would not have, bouts with depression. So I agreed to do it. So that's how it had come about for us to be able to write that book together. And that it meant a lot to me on so many levels. And again, kind of going back to what I said initially, growing up between two brothers, so just having an affinity for Black men, and also knowing that Black men do not recognize depression, in themselves as easily or even at all. So writing the book came about for him with me saying to him, are you sure you're not depressed about a situation that's in the book that he talks about? And he, I'm angry, and I'm thinking, well, anger is a part of, being depressed. But as we would talk about it, he did come to the conclusion, yes, I am depressed. And so then he would go and start, after he kind of dealt with it for some time, he was preaching some sermons on it. And he just told me how many people would come up to him after the sermons and say, we don't hear sermons about depression in church as often as we would need to. And then that is when his agent encouraged him to write the book and, to use, my voice with that, my response to it. So that is how the book had come about. And then when we're talking about depression, one thing that I think that we specifically, when we have to think about a cultural consideration, is that because I know, people don't want the stigma, as you're saying, in the label. And I also think that to have to consider culturally, specifically kind of Black folk, if you will, I tell them that what they are going through is a typical response to be depressed. If you're dealing with systemic issues, day in and day out, there you go. So I think helping people to understand that this would be a natural, a healthy even response to what they are enduring helps them to accept it more, because now it doesn't feel so much like a stigma. It's like, oh, really? Like, yeah, you may not get people to acknowledge the fact that, you go out every day and you're dealing with microaggressions, or you're dealing with, with structural stuff, stuff on your job that you kind of go, it's because I'm a Black man, or it's because I'm a Black woman. I mean, we just constantly do it so much. It's like just breathing, it's just natural for us, But to have someone to acknowledge that and to say, well, if you're dealing with that day in and day out and day in and day out, why would you not at some points feel depressed? So I think that being able to really filter that through that cultural lens, and to be able to say, specifically to some kind of Black focus, that was been my majority kind of client population, Black church folk. Okay. So that helps people to be able to recognize, like, oh, okay, it does not have to necessarily mean that, because Christine, I'm sure people literally think that means I'm going to have to go and be connected to like electrodes placed on my head, kind of a thing, And I'm thinking, no. So I think that once we are able to even shape it and talk about it in the context of their lived experiences, it helps people to, when I say, no, let me say acknowledge. I don't want to say accept, acknowledge that, okay, yes, some depression could be present here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and the ways that shows up, I mean, you talked about really how insightfully you help to translate the language of psychology into the language of the church context that you were a part of, right? Instead of trying to drag people to the language of psychology.
That's right.
And then also just recognizing that, when there's an issue, it is likely that that it is happening because of spiritual, of physical, of social, of systemic. Like all of that can be on the table.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that there could be a spiritual dynamic at play. And that doesn't rule out an antidepressant medication.
That's right.
If that's what the Lord wants to use to bless you.
That's right.
Yeah. It can sometimes it can be all the above. Right? And so this book is called Finding Hope in a Dark Place, Facing Loneliness, Depression, and Anxiety with the Power of Grace. And I've got to tell you, I just find it so, the methodology of the book, the idea of you all telling a story together, which is something that does not happen. Yeah. It does not happen. I remember training and having the privilege of watching people who had signed off the rights to allow me to see their therapy sessions so that I could train. Yeah. And when people, you think about just how gracious it is to do that.
That's right.
But we cannot train well apart from people being willing to share their story.
That's right.
And also this collaborative relationship that is described here. So it's a really unique book in that way. And it's a real gift, I think, to anyone who has struggled with these things, loneliness, depression, and anxiety. What do you hope as people's takeaway from this book? What do you want them to grab a hold of? What do you want them to make sure that they don't miss?
Yeah. Well, I tell people, Clarence always tells people I'm his counselor. And I'm like, I'm not your counselor. I'm your friend.
He's like, you're my counselor.
He said, you're a counselor. And I'm going, it doesn't hurt that I happen to be a therapist, dude. So, but nonetheless,
he knows.
Counselor friend. Yeah, we know. Yeah, we know. But I think that what I want people to walk away knowing is that, kind of going back to what we talked about in the beginning, like, this whole epidemic with loneliness, right? Is that any person, like, you don't have to be a therapist to help people who are dealing with depression or loneliness or anxiety. I try to tell people that, you can be that corrective emotional experience for anybody.
That's good.
So I'm hopeful that people will walk away knowing that they'll just think to themselves, just being kind, or just even acknowledging what a person is going through and not trying to, especially in the church setting, it's kind of spiritual bypass, and we spiritualize all of the things, and as God is just, going to make you stronger through this and all the things. It's like, well, can we just back up and just give them space to say, I'm feeling anxious. I am lonely. I am depressed, without spiritualizing that. Yes. So I'm so hopeful that people will walk away knowing that it is okay to, and I call it a sacred space, like, creating a sacred space for people to be able to acknowledge what they are feeling emotionally, to say it, to walk with people through it, and not try to, as you were just saying, instead of trying to drag people to psychology, I'm saying instead of trying to drag people, like out of their whatever pit they may be in, it's like, I can come there where you are.
That's right.
I can come where you are, and it's okay. I'm not scared. You don't have to rush your way through this, or whatever the case may be. But that's what I hope. I hope that when we think about being the members of the body, many members, right? And that we are interdependent. We have to, especially in this day and time, loneliness is the epidemic, right? We have to be mindful of how can we ourselves even deal with our own issues and limitations, so that when we do interact with the other members, we are healthy. And we can be healthy for them, and we can also help them to become more healthy if they're in places where they are a little bit more depressed or anxious or lonely for legitimate reasons. Meaning, it's not, when I say legitimate reasons, I know that people can say, when we're thinking about grief, well, such and such wouldn't want you to be sitting around. Like, you get on back out there and everything. It's like, no. Like, give them space to feel this void, to feel F-E-E-L rather. Right. Feel the void before we try to feel it. F-I-L-L. Yes. So, but I do think that we have to deal with our own, again, lived experiences. What are our traumas that will rush us to want to rush other people through those things.
Well, the absolute discomfort.
Sit with our discomfort.
That's right.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
And it is uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable.
Difficult emotions are contagious.
That's right.
Yes. And I think part of it is that you love that person. Whoever, hopefully. Assuming you love that person.
As a verb.
That's right.
You love that person.
That's right.
And you want, and yes, your discomfort is on the table, but you really want to see a corrective emotional experience for that person. And then you want something to change, for them. And so sometimes that desire, that passion can get the best of us. That's right. And so we end up trying to drag them out,
That's right.
Before prematurely, before they're really ready, to come out into the light.
That's right.
To use the language.
That's right. That's right.
I would love, Dr. Monique, if you can, I just want to invite you to dream at this moment about, in light of what the Surgeon General said about loneliness being an epidemic. Comparable to smoking daily. I actually think they said several packs a day, but but it's very dangerous. It's lethal. Can you dream up what it might look like for the church to really provide an intervention? Into, as one who worked in the church for 16 years, across demographics within the Black church. Can you kind of just dream, right now, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but what would that look like for the church, to be able to provide an intervention into this epidemic of loneliness that is going on right now?
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. The many ways I could answer that. One way that immediately comes to mind, and what has been a burden for me, even concerning the church, is generationally speaking, bringing even the generations together. I think that connection. Okay. I just think that in this day and time, it can be easy for the church to reinforce kind of the disconnect among the generations. Absolutely. When you think about, you go to church, you got children's church. And I'm not, saying these things are not good things, but I am saying that if you come and everybody goes in separate ways, where do you ever have the time to...
Married people go.
Yeah.
The men go here, the women. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, where do you have this opportunity, again, as I was saying beforehand, where do we bring people, together, like in the middle, if you will, like this core? What is the core? What is that nucleus that is holding people together, which I hope Jesus is the center, right? But I would love to see more intergenerational connection. I think that there are babies that are in nurseries that can be held. Maybe they don't get it from their own parents for whatever the reason. And I think that there are older people who probably did not have grandchildren of their own, or, their grandbabies are grown now or whatever, that would love to be able to connect and hold that baby and just rock that baby. I think that those are ways that you can quell some of that loneliness within the church. And I also just think that the church really does have to focus in on emotional health as a form of disciplship. That's right. That's just where I sit. It's kind of the work that I do.
Vitally important.
Vitally important.
Holistic discipleship.
Yes. And until we address some of the emotional issues that, all of us have, right? But if we're going to have to talk about those things more directly and to be able to acknowledge it and call it by its rightful name, so that we can have more healthy relationships. Amen. We can have more healthy relationships. And I do believe that once we can have, healthier people, dealing with first and foremost self, that intrapersonal relationship, saying, I want to make certain that I am healthy as I am interacting with other people, addressing whatever biases I may have, or, whatever else the case may be. Being able to have that relationship first and foremost with self. And then from that healthy place, giving to others.
Yeah, that's good.
Especially in the church. Especially in the church.
That reminds me of Pete Scazzero's work, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, right?
Yes.
And how a person can be called, saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, and bitter, and short-tempered, and accusatory, and easily frustrated, and going off. I mean, all of that stuff can be on the same table, and you can still be a child of God.
That's right.
And still be so unhealthy.
That's right.
That nobody can recognize that you're a child of God.
That's right.
And his work and many before him really help us to live more congruently, so that our witness is not compromised.
That's right.
By the fact that we haven't dealt with the stuff,
the emotional work,
that's going on with us.
Yeah,
I am so grateful to have you here today. We could talk to you
thank
much longer. We really could talk to you much longer today. But I hope that when people listen in, they begin to hear the compassion that you lead with, and just the way in which, you give compassion over to others when you communicate with them, Dr. Mo, and that allows them to be more self-compassionate, so that healing can start. So it's been a privilege and an honor to have you at the table today.
I appreciate y'all. Love being here. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, even before we go, can you talk to our sisters at the table? Tell them how they can follow your work and get connected to you, because you do, quite some extensive, counseling work.
Sure. Yeah. So they can check out my website. It's drmoniquesmithgatson.com. I am probably most active on Instagram. I just can't get into Twitter or X or whatever it is today.
What it is confusion.
There you go. So, I just don't need that. I just don't invite any extra.
Propaganda, but that's a whole other episode.
Okay, that's a whole different episode. Exactly. But yeah, so Instagram, they can find me at Dr. Monique Smith Gadson as well. I'm there on Twitter, but I don't do anything there. Just and Facebook the same way. So all those platforms the same thing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sitting at the table with us.
Yeah, so fun.